Just a Job is the podcast for the modern woman to redefine what success looks like. We highlight real women and their real stories. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just a Job. It's your girls, Ellen and Sarah, my beautiful, wonderful, smart, intelligent co-host, Sarah. Hey, how's it going?
Wow, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have the biggest smile on my face.
Just trying to get some warm fuzzies going here, you know?
I love it. Warm Fuzzies Fridays. And now I will return the favor. Ellen, you corporate mother freaking baddie. Welcome to the club. She survived her first week. And I hope all of y'all sent her a message on Monday. And if you haven't already, go ahead and send her some messages because she's about to enter into week 2.
So many people did. And delusionally, I think it's because of the podcast. So thank you, Sarah.
Oh my God. It can be because of any reason.
But it can be for any reason. So we have a weekly stand-up we're going to jump into before we go into Toby's episode or Toby's interview. I wrote notes, everyone, so be prepared for the level of talking. Before I go into my notes, I'm going to establish a green light for myself, feeling good. This is decaf coffee I have to my right. Sarah, what color are you today? What's the temp?
I'm feeling green. This is my last meeting of the day, which is good. So I'm excited.
Hooray.
Almost the weekend.
My note says finance department LOL. So let's talk about my new job. Hopefully I won't rant on this for too long. If anyone knows me, I am not gifted in the math department. I never have been. I never will be. It is an area that I have always struggled in and I don't like. And now in my new job, I am in the finance department, which truly makes me laugh that I am now a finance girly. Like, who would have thought I would land here? But my new job, I really, really like it. It's really interesting to notice the cultural differences between a very small smallish, medium-sized company to a global giant. I mean, like some of the things that, as I was going through my job search, noted as cultural things that were a non-negotiable for me, like maternity leave. This company has 6 months maternity and paternity leave.
Take some notes, everybody.
I mean, and the perks that they have in office, while I do not love going into the office, what they offer makes me genuinely enticed to go into the office. They have workout classes. They have a gym. They have a wellness center. They have a coffee bar. They have great food. They have a walking path. They have flex spaces so you can kind of like wander around and go work wherever you want. It's lovely. I really have enjoyed that aspect of it.
Good.
My new boss is wonderful. Like we're getting along really, really well. She's mentioned even like trying to bring me on full time after my contract is up. So like everything so far is so great. And it's so wonderful experiencing working at a company that I am culturally more aligned with. And there's diversity. The CEO of the company is an immigrant himself. My boss grew up in Dubai. There's women in leadership. And it's really like ticking all the boxes. Not to quote Love Island, but ticking all of the boxes for me of like things that I want in a company that I work for. So I'm really, really enjoying that.
Yep.
I put down things that I find interesting. 10%, like give or take, of their workforce are contract workers. So they kind of cheat the system in a way that's mutually beneficial for both parties. So they don't do layoffs because they have contract workers. And if they need to be more lean, they just don't bring those people on at the end. Plus, for the contract worker, for me, it's more enticing to work harder because I'm like, I want to work here when I'm done. And I just really think that that is like so genius and so interesting.
Definitely a fascinating model.
Love it.
Also, too, it kind of like bursts the bubble, if you will, from like a contract perspective. We've talked about this before, but like as a full-time employee, sometimes there's this like, oh my God, how long am I here for? That like you almost need that like you're working towards something. Like there's this like
Right.
almost end goal, if you will. If you like it, you stay on. If you don't, you can leave. But it's
Right.
almost this kind of like exit strategy, if you will. But also too from like the company's perspective. I didn't think about it that way, but that's smart on their behalf.
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, that's just, it makes sense again on both sides, and it's beneficial for everybody. So, I just interesting things I'm learning as I'm, made it through my first week. It's so much, the typical onboarding crap, which is not very exciting, but still learning about the team and kind of how people interact and who's where and who does what. The like time management transition has been tough for me.
Sure.
Like just with balancing going into the office. Tim and I have one car and managing what that looks like. So it's been an interesting transition. I'm trying to like figure out how it's all going to work, but overall positive experience, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So green flags. That's enough of me yapping my flap. Sarah, talk me through your weekly stand-up. What's new and exciting?
Yay, a good week for you. And good. I feel like the acclimation period, the like onboarding period of any new job is always so fun because you're just like, so what am I do? How do I fill my 40 hours? Like, what am I supposed to do the entire time besides just like learning names and faces?
Yeah.
But I feel like you enjoy it while you have it.
Yeah. Talk me through your weekly stand-up.
Sure. This past week has proved interesting. Obviously everyone knows that I'm half unemployed, and I had a breakdown obviously last weekend because I just feel like what's new?
I'm sorry.
You're like, been there, done that, sweetheart. You'll get through it.
Keeping it real.
Well, no, I was like, it's so easy to talk about like, oh, you're more than your job and your identity doesn't come from your job. But when it's like put into the spotlight, it's kind of one of those like, who am I? Like, and I think that that's what I was working through last weekend because I'm just like, I like working. Like I consider myself a workhorse. Like I just like staying busy. I like being productive. And when you unfold and untangle all of that, it's just like, but who is Sarah? Like, what does Sarah like to do? Like, how does she have fun? And I've always loved spring, and things are starting to change around here. And I'm just like, okay, I feel like I'm like a little butterfly coming out of her cocoon, and there's like all these opportunities. So this week has proven interesting for me because like last week was a lot of, refining my resume, which holy crap is so it's not difficult, but and it's like it takes so much longer than you think, and like applying for jobs is quite literally a job. So that was a lot of last week, and then like a lot of this week there was a lot of action that came out of from that. Like I'm having a lot of conversations. I encourage anybody, even if you're not looking for a job, like start networking. Just start having conversations with people. Like it's so important. You challenge yourself. I'm gonna have one chat a week with somebody new, whether they're in your job or whatever. But anyway, so that was this week, and I have some opportunities, some that are unfolding a little bit quicker than others, and now I'm just in this like weird limbo of trying to figure out what the next phase of my life and my career look like. So that's probably a lot of what I'm going to be working through mentally and physically this weekend into next, or this weekend rather, and into next. But
when it rains, it pours. Oh my gosh.
I know.
Everything happening all at once.
Yeah. And I think that like I say all of this knowing the privilege that I have and like understanding that these are like good things. And, we talked about this before, but it's like, it's just a blip. And I think having this new framework and this like new context of reminding myself like it is just a job, and it almost, I think, I mean, obviously it works in the positive, but I think it works in the positive for like both parties involved. Yeah. Like, I will show up and I'll be a better employee because I'm like taking care of myself. And I am curious, like this in this next iteration of Sarah, like how being able to like keep that close to my chest will impact how I show up as an employee. So
totally. And
a lot of games up in my head going on right
yeah,
now, but
yeah,
thankfully the Masters are on this weekend, so like I'll distract myself with that. I don't actually watch golf. I just like listening to golf.
it's so relaxed. We hope everybody really enjoys Toby's episode. She was my previous boss and is now a wonderful friend and mentor to me and many others. She is someone I dearly look up to, and I'm so glad that she agreed to come on and share her story. It's kind of a full circle moment for
Mhm.
me. And Sarah, I feel like you know her previous to
Practically.
the interview because I talk about her all the time. So I hope everybody really enjoys it. And we're going to go ahead and jump into her interview now. Today, we have Toby Walton joining us. She has over 25 years of leadership experience in the healthcare and technology space with a passion for growing business through strong client relationships and operational excellence. She has an extensive background in developing and implementing business strategies that drive growth and innovation. She is also one of my now very good friends and mentor. Welcome, Toby, to the podcast.
Thank you and Sarah for having me. I have looked forward to this since you started this.
I was going to say, I remember calling you during the workday, and saying, hey, because we had talked about kind of ideation, wanting to start something. I said, hey, I found it. We figured it out. We know what we want to do. And now here you are as the guest on the podcast. What a fun full circle moment, huh?
For sure. And congratulations to the both of you. This is fun. You've had some great episodes and some really fun guests.
Yes.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
Thank you. Toby, we're going to take it back a couple of years. When you were little, what did you want to do when you grew up?
When I was little, I had two things. First, my first memory of knowing of something that I wanted to do was to be a nurse. And I think a large part of that had to do, I had a grandmother who was a nurse. And when I was really little, she had the white outfit, the white hat, and went to the office looking like that every day. And there was something magical about that for me. And so from a very young age, that was the first thing. And then I remember also wanting to be a principal of a school. And we played a lot of school in the backyard. And I remember I didn't really gravitate to the teaching part of it, but running a school and being a principal was something else that I aspired to, probably around 8 years old or something like that. So
just that's the definition of a boss. I'm like,
totally.
She just skipping teacher, skipping vice principal, just like straight to the, head leader of the crew.
I should have probably paid attention to that. I mean, it's definitely more about the organizational aspect of it, all the running of the things.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I take it you weren't a principal, and that's probably a good thing.
Peter got it up pretty quick, and then put more sights on just general business world. And after I got my taste of that, really knew that's where my passions were. So I love nursing and all that about it. I would have made a terrible nurse. It's a hard profession.
Oh,
Very
absolutely.
hard. Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh.
And I can't help but think also too, if you had your, grandma to look up to, there was some element of like a cute outfit to it and you're young. It's like, yeah,
for sure.
I get to wear this cute outfit. Okay. So no longer looking at being a nurse or a principal. What was your first job out of college and where did that take you into your career?
Interestingly enough, I was a little directionless when I graduated college, just still not sure how I was going to take my degree and what I was going to do. I had a criminal justice degree, which didn't necessarily lend itself to the business world, but I did a lot of the more administrative tracks with that, knowing, again, maybe more organizational structures to the criminology world, and ended up working for the state of Missouri doing child abuse and neglect investigations. And I did that for about 5 to 7 years. And that was a learning experience that I found foundational to literally everything that I did after that. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about people, learned a lot about the city itself and really opportunities available to people. And working for the state of Missouri was another interesting dynamic unto itself. and actually had the opportunity, which was the career change and trajectory that has put me on a path that I really never looked back from. They needed a group of people that they wanted to send back to school to learn computer programming. And I raised my hand for that opportunity. They sent me back to school. And that really is what kind of launched my realm or my career path into IT. And again, never really looked back from that.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. People say that all the time, like never
Yeah.
say no to an opportunity.
Right.
And like when you hear that, I'm sure all the time, but then actually experiencing it and raising your hand and being like, what's the worst that could happen? I can learn more and further my career in a way that I couldn't in a job previously. So how cool that you were like, I'll do it. I'm raising my hand, right?
Yeah. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
definitely was a stretch, but it just sounded so interesting. And the goal of what they were trying to accomplish was to take medical records for foster children and put them in an electronic format. And if you can think of all the dynamics that surrounded that back in the day, just it being paper and not connected or tethered to anything, it was really going to be a massive undertaking for the state with huge ramifications for the children who were in the system. So again, really kind of getting my foot into the healthcare IT aspect of it, and doing great things for the kids in the state also.
Rewarding,
Amazing.
but it's also like feeding
Yeah.
your passion and like where you would like your career to further go. What was that like? Like what was that then going to school full time, or were you also working while taking classes?
Yeah, and that was part of the unique experience of it. We completely were removed from our current roles, put 100% immersion back into school, and about after, I think it was like a 9 to 12 month program. On the other end of it, we were put on a program or a project team that dove right into the initiative that we just talked about. So it was absolutely transitioning and a hard left from what I was doing. But I can look back at that, and I mean, as scary and as different as it was at the time to do that, that for me was one of the first times where I really just put myself out there. And after I did that, everything after that just it didn't seem scary or didn't seem risky. And it really kind of set me up for a lot of yeses moving down the road that I think paid off for me very well.
It's always the first jump that's the
Yeah.
scariest. And when
Yeah.
you prove what you're capable of, I also think it kind of gives you some sort of ceiling, or not ceiling, gives you some sort of floor, if you will. You're like, okay, I know what I'm capable of. Like, I can only go up from here. These things will only get easier. Or maybe the idea of saying yes will only get easier. The work itself won't, but that
Well,
jump.
payoff and reward too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the payoff and the reward for putting yourself out there a little bit more, or maybe living on the edge a little bit more than maybe you're comfortable with? But I have found over and over, and I've got a lot of great friends and other leaders and other people that I've worked with. It's the same is true. When you're living out there a little bit more uncomfortable and putting yourself out there, that's where you get the best growth, the best learning, the best opportunities. For me personally, it's in my career when I have felt frustrated. If I kind of sit with it a little bit and try to figure out why I'm feeling frustrated or what the situation might be, it's typically because it's stagnant and
Mm-hmm.
it's time to do something different or push myself in a little bit of a different way.
Well, that perfectly leads me into my next question,
Yeah,
Toby.
that's
Thank
good
you.
too.
Oh, well, there you go.
I love when you just handed it to me. Thank you. I'll take that. That's easy. When did you know that it was time to leave that role doing the medical records transcribing from paper into electronic records? Was there a time that you knew it was time to move? Did a new opportunity find you? What was that transition like?
That was more of a new opportunity found me. Working on the project team in that role, we were introduced to a lot of different companies and contractors working on that project. And another contractor on that project called me and said that there was a role at a local company here in Kansas City looking for developers. And I applied, got that role with American Century Investments. And I worked as a project manager and a developer there for quite a few years. on their e-commerce sites and learned a ton about a whole nother arena, but still steeped in heavy technology projects. Found, again, deeper passion for it, and honestly found a love for project management during that role too.
Is that when you got your PMP?
No, I didn't get that until a few years later, but definitely foundational for that as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Project management. I'm like, I think that a lot of people, it's like you don't go into it thinking like, I want to be a project manager. It's like, I just have a love and honestly like a knack for it. I feel like that's how a lot of project managers are. Okay, so you are working in that role. What's next? Like where did life take you? And I feel like I kind of know this story, but I want to hear it from you.
Oh my gosh! So I think where you're asking is when I opened my startup. Yeah. So I had a business partner, and her and I found each other in a scenario where we were kind of free agents, and a career trajectory for her has taken a little bit of turn, as well for me. So within about a 24-hour time frame, her and I found each other and found ourselves in a like scenario, ready to do our next big thing. And over that weekend, we had connected, had quite a few alcoholic beverages. I think there was some vodka, some cold Miller Lights in there, and really decided let's go do something and let's go have some fun together. And that next Monday, it's a very interesting story. And I'm such a firm believer you've got to surround yourself with great people and people who will show up for you, even though you might not necessarily know that. And we had somebody do that for us that was kind of the kick in the rear that we needed that Monday morning after all those drinks, right? She had actually gotten a phone call, and the person that called her said, "Kristen, honey, are you making good use of your time?" And she sat straight up and was like, "Oh my gosh, we're not making good use of our time." So within minutes of that phone call, she shows up at my door and said, "We are not making good use of our time." And that day, that very minute, we broke out the laptop, sat in my living room, and wrote our business plan over the next couple of days. And it started to become really clear to us that we were onto something, that we really were committed to making a go of it. And our next step after that was to shop it around to some of, again, our mentors and some of our friends in the business and outside of the business, because we wanted to really, test it. And, you do something like that, you put a lot on the line, a lot of risk associated to it. And we just wanted to maybe have a little validation that we were onto something, not just what we thought. So no one told us we were crazy. Everybody said, solid plan, give it a go. And we just started doing that, one foot in front of the other, one day after another, and working from a plan and being, again, real clear about what we wanted to do is kind of how we kickstarted it.
Oh my gosh. So what I'm learning from that, no, I'm just kidding, is
take notes.
Is yes, cold beverages lead to good ideas. No, that
I found that true.
So next time you need a little inspiration, phone up your best friend, phone up somebody in your circle. But no, what I'm trying to get at is the leaning on people, and again, kind of like putting yourself out there, being willing to take those risks, and not being uncomfortable with people potentially saying no or saying that what you don't have is a good idea, but sticking with it, because obviously it worked out in your favor. I'm curious how the rest of this continued to be, and any sort of lessons that you learned in those first 6 months of launching the business.
Well, that's interesting, because in the first 6 months, you've got this big concept and, you're trying to get it off the ground. And sometimes it can be very hard when you're trying to get traction, not to be everything to everyone. And I think all businesses, especially startups, can go through that as you're trying to land your first client, trying to get to your first milestone goal, either financial or number of clients, number of work volume, whatever that might be. And what we found throughout the journey of that having that business is the clearer that we got, whether it's our service lines with how we wanted to show up to our clientele, even down to the clientele that we wanted, being more clear about that helped us, one, service better, two, develop the products and services around those verticals to show up in bigger, better ways. And that just allowed us to get more sticky with our clients, show up bigger, better for our clients, and land even more clients because we were so clear on it. And once you get clear on it, you start to get really good on it. And it allows the things that don't matter to fall away a lot easier, which again, I think really opens the door and not just open the door, but open everything up to bigger possibilities of expansion on what you know you want to be great at versus what you can let go and not focus on. That for me was probably one of the bigger takeaways I had in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us about your working relationship with your co-founder. I know you guys were friends previously, and what was that dynamic like making the shift from friends and like professionals to being together, starting a business together and scaling it into something that was, very successful?
So we were friends. We also worked together for a good stint. I actually reported to her for a good stint as well. And so making that decision to be business partners, we already knew each other in both aspects of that. So that made it easier. But we went in it 50-50, and the entire time it was a 50-50 thing. And we were real good about balancing. If I'm not comfortable, there's a reason, let's talk through it. And, there might have been some scenarios she wasn't super comfortable with something. So if it wasn't good for both, it wasn't good for the business. And we stuck to that very harshly through the whole thing, even to the end. Jumping to when we sold the business, we had received a call from a national competitor. And actually, she had actually got the email that first came in regarding it. And from that very first email, we decided, because we were not even in the market to sell, we were not thinking to sell. In fact, we had just rebranded, we had redone our service lines, we had really done some really good core central work for the last 6 months on getting us repositioned for another spring or another growth. And this kind of came out of left field. And at that time, we were like, as long as we're both saying yes, then we keep moving forward. But the minute one of us is a no, then we're pulling back out. And ultimately, we said yeses all the way to the point where we were signing contracts and popping corks. And it turned out to be a really great experience for us, the whole sell process, and exiting the business after that.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
This is like a part of the business that I think sometimes I personally forget about when it comes to being like an entrepreneur. You think so much and focus so much on building the business. And I mean, I didn't go to business school, but I imagine for a lot of founders, there's this like kind of thinking maybe I'll sell this eventually, like depending on their growth, but also too, like depending on how invested I want to be in it. And I recently saw that Jacqueline Johnson, the founder of Create and Cultivate, a few years back sold the business for about like 25 million. She went back and bought her business back, which I think is just so insane. What was it like for you? I imagine it's a very like emotional experience, especially knowing that you weren't seeking this, exit plan. What was it like when you got that first email? Like, what was your immediate reaction? And I don't know, I can imagine my stomach dropping a little bit, but also such intense curiosity.
I remember thinking, well, that seems odd. And not odd in a way that someone would be interested, but odd timing, because we, again, had just done all that foundational work. So I don't remember necessarily having like, yeah, let's go do this. It was more of I'm interested in learning more. And that's, again, the path that we just kept taking. The more we learn, the better this decision seemed to be for us. So I don't know if there was a time or a point where it switched to an absolute yes or an absolute no. Is more curiosity as we went through, and as we continued down that journey with those with our new business partners there, it just made more and more sense. And I did not have a, oh my God, what am I going to do next? Or I didn't feel like I had just, cut off a limb, or, you hear some of the business owners who are just like lost without it. It really wasn't our experience. And I think it was just because we were making good and right decisions for the time and for the business.
Mm-hmm. What was that moment like? Like signing the papers, the ink is dry, you're popping champagne. Like, what's going through your head? Like, what was that experience like?
It felt great. I mean, for if you look back to where we were sitting in my living room and her getting the call about not making good use of our time, from that to being able to do that in about an 8 or 9 year period, we had ran fast and we ran far during that 8 year period. And I think for me, it was more of a moment of just absolutely being so proud of what we were able to build and accomplish from nothing to something that somebody was interested in soliciting us to have a conversation about to purchase it. So I remember just having a lot of pride in that moment, and not really the what's next thought process at all, because I mean, I just feel confident that that's going to appear, and the next thing that I was going to go do or be was going to present itself in the right time and the right way. Is it? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I find that it typically does.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of like what we've had Alyssa. She was one of our first podcast hosts. She was like, I never have a fear that something next is coming around the corner. Like, I just kind of have this innate confidence, which you've teed me up quite well again. Next, before jumping into your next role, did you take some time? And was that like the first time in your career that you took like a good chunk of time, or what was that transition like into the next phase of your career?
I did not take a break after that, and
Okay.
I should have, honestly. Again, we ran, like I said, fast and far during that time frame, and so I probably should have taken a break. But I had another opportunity come up where it was a business that was getting ready to sell, and they needed to increase sales and get some things positioned well. So I jumped from one to the other, and it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it. But looking back, I should have taken just some time for myself, just to recalibrate, get a little headspace in between, and then maybe be a little bit more on sure footing when I was ready to go again. But I have not really taken a lot of time in my career for things like that, because there's usually some opportunity that's there that I'm very excited about, want to start working on and getting my feet wet.
Yeah. It's hard to take a moment to,
Yeah.
at least, like, I can speak for myself, and I'm Sarah, I know you're similar, and Toby, you're similar as well, of always looking for what that next step is going to be and how can I grow and what's the next opportunity going to look like. As all project managers, we like to plan our own lives as well. Yes.
Right.
And be moving on to the next thing. So I can imagine that it was kind of, even if it was just for a second, stopping and being and celebrating before moving on, like that was all the time you needed before you were ready to move to the next thing.
Well, there was quite a bit of a transition. Once we sold, there's about a 6 month transition that we hung back just to make sure things were working well. So there was a lot of time and grace in there. So not necessarily a break, but it was not what I was experienced before.
Sure. So the next company that you went to, where you were helping them increase sales before that, they themselves were they being acquired? Is that what you said?
Yeah, they were acquired by another company.
Gotcha. Then where does your PMP come into play? Because I have a couple of questions about that.
So
when was
I got my PMP when I was working at a global company that focused again on healthcare IT. And I was in a role where it was I had I had about 8 different offices nationwide, and there were 7 different verticals that I'd worked on, everything from early intervention to WIC supportive sustenance services, and everything in between. And there was a lot of moving parts to it. Like I said, I had worked in PM like roles before, and I had just found that I wanted more, um, I think more of the education around it, more of the mythology around it. I wanted to be a technical expert at it. So I went and got my PMP. And that for me was, it was transformative in the way that it gave words to a lot of things that I was doing. It gave me more formality around it. And I was able to be a lot more effective and efficient at the way I approached projects. So
Mhm.
I never was in a true just PM role, but I used it in every single role that I'd had since then. And I mean, I
Mhm.
even use it to this day,
Mhm.
to include the household stuff too, Alan.
No, totally.
For sure.
Which I'm sure all of our husbands love when we're like,
Oh, yeah.
project manager, it's time to make dinner.
Yeah.
Looking back, is there one credential that specifically sticks out to you as the most effective, or one that was super difficult? Like anyone that specifically speaks to you that you want to talk a little bit more about?
I don't, again, the PNP for me was foundational to
Mm.
a lot of different things. And it helps you see things in a different light. I, again, it is also something that gives you the tools to be effective in executing. And that for me, again, it hit every single position that I've ever been in, if nothing else, to help my teams organize in a more effective way as well. I also got my certification, 6 black belt, and also my quality management and organizational excellence. That was probably the hardest one that I took, but they're all pretty monster at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day. They're 4-hour plus exams, and it takes a lot of experience leading up to both of those, quite honestly. And um, I appreciated the process of learning the methodologies around it, especially the quality aspect of it, because it helps you see ways in which organizations can organize products and services with quality at the end and also at the beginning. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
designing it for quality output from the beginning to where you're not necessarily paying for the quality defects on the back end of it. And being able to have, again, the formality and the learnings around it to be a technical expert at it, there's an efficiency that you gain and also an ability to organize people around that very quickly as well. I think also not most companies, it was very important when I had my company and companies that I work with that they focus on the customer and the delivery aspect of it. Because without that, things just start to get really hard. And
Yeah.
the complaints will go up, the revenue will go down, people get frustrated, and it's just a spiral that I think just paying attention to a few key things can really help turn things around and allow you to focus on more abundance than focus on maybe more of the defects or errors or things that might be happening with delivery.
Mm-hmm.
People want to be excited about what they do and what they deliver. And I think it gives a lot of really good energy around it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I'm curious about the transition of being a business owner to stepping back into a role of being an employee. What did that bring to you in your career, and what were some challenges and maybe some advantages that you experienced?
So one of the challenges, I'll start with that. I mean, when you're owning a business, you're looking at every aspect of it, from the financial to the delivery to employee engagement, satisfaction, culture, branding. I mean, you're looking at everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking a role that was specific in a department or overseeing a department, um, I felt like I had a lot of extra time or headspace versus thinking about everything. And so that was a little bit of an adjustment, but I wouldn't say anything, insurmountable or that tripped me up in any kind of way. On the positive side of it, having had that purview of looking at it from a 360 view I think it allowed me to look at things differently and probably prioritize things more effectively, just based on overall organizational needs.
Mm-hmm.
There, there's a lot of dynamics in it, and I think it made me show up better in certain situations, especially when it looked at the client aspect of it.
Toby, you've had an incredible career. As Ellen mentioned at the beginning, you've had 25 years of amazing work that you've accomplished. If you had young Toby, that like fresh out of school, young Toby, sitting right next to you right now, what are some things that you would say to her? Maybe some things to watch out for, or some advantages or things to look for. And I know that this is a big question, but I am curious.
There's so many things that I would sit down and have a conversation with her about. And it would first start off with everybody is, it's not the fake it till you make it necessarily, because I go back and forth of whether I like that or not. But there's some truth in there. And not everybody has the answers. And you're not always the one in the room that's lacking the information or the experience. And I think that's something that all women very specifically go through throughout their entire career. And I still talk to women now who are in their later stage of the career, still dealing with imposter syndrome and things like that. So I don't think it necessarily is only in, earlier in your career, but having a better understanding and foundation that everybody's going through that and everybody experiences it to some extent, and have more of that, just live on the edge and push yourself, because that is really where the goodness is going to be. You're going to have more fun in those experiences when you're putting yourself out there. And one thing that the business taught me a lot, and something that has been concreted time and time again, is I don't necessarily believe in failure anymore. I think failure is something that I don't talk about in my vernacular. Ellen, I doubt if you've ever even heard me say we failed or that's a failure. I just don't believe it anymore. And I think if a 20-something-year-old me would have understood that if something's not working, there's typically a reason why it's not working. It's either not meant to be right then. It's not the right place for you to be in. Because those situations, whether it's the frustration that I talked about earlier, or it's just you're spinning your wheels, there's something that's got to change in that scenario. So it's more of a pivot. And that for me was a game changer when I understood, like, this isn't working how I thought, or I'm not getting as far down the path as I had hoped, or it doesn't feel right where I am where I thought I should be. And I just need to do something different or switch it up a little bit, and then it might come all into place. And I think having that as an understanding versus it's black or white, I'm good or bad, I failed, I succeeded, that would have saved me, I think, a lot of heartache, a lot of frustration. And honestly, it limited me a lot. And I probably didn't say yes for some things that I thought I could have or should have, and limited myself. So I think that sky's the limit. I would have told her that, and it's how you show up and where you can show up, and always be pushing yourself. The other thing too is making sure that you surround yourself with amazing people. Because everybody's always not the one, right? I might not be the one for everyone, and vice versa. And there are scenarios and situations, even companies that I've been in, where the culture was just not a fit. And I probably stayed a little bit too long in that culture, knowing that it wasn't the right fit for me. And again, thinking that I might have limited myself there versus just moving on to where it was the right fit for myself.
Toby,
Those
you
are,
are
I think,
just
the three core things.
first of all, love, absolutely love. And then two, you're leading me and teeing up these questions like so perfectly. Thank you.
She should just, Toby, just be our third host.
Seriously.
I'd love to. If I could get to hang out with the two of you all day, yes.
We're pretty cool. We're pretty fun. What can I say?
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. I just did something that is so you. It's insane. I just remember like the first couple of times we were in office together and in a meeting or something where people are talking or like, oh, you have this thought, you like scribble like a maniac on your notepad.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just did that when you were talking because I was like, oh, I got to remember to ask her this question. You were talking about culture. I want to know what you think is one of the biggest cultural shifts you've seen in the workplace from the start of your career to now.
Mm.
oh gosh. I think women empowerment in the workforce is one of the bigger shifts. I think that there's more opportunities for women to show up in bigger, better ways. Definitely one of them. And I think the fact that we talk about culture, it was not
Hmm.
really anything that we talked about a lot. I mean, you showed up, you did your job, you tried to excel. Again, make yourself available for those opportunities. But I don't ever remember it being like an actual conscious decision or a strategy that a company had to lay out. And I think
Mhm.
that for me has evolved over my career. And there's been times where it's been almost the only focus. And again, it has a lot to do with the job market sometimes too. Is it hot
Mhm.
or is it cold for the employee versus the employer? So I think that speaks to it a lot. But I think today there's a lot of care and concern around making sure that work environments are good for people to feel successful, because at the end of the day, and I think it's the right focus. If you have people that want to empower, that they feel that they are in the right place with the right people in the right roles and can be stretching themselves in a way that doesn't feel like you're overwhelmed or being punished, that's when magic happens, right? And the more people that you have in an organization that can show up in that way with a ton of autonomy to make the right decisions for them in their scenario, that can impact teams, it can impact revenue, it can impact client satisfaction. And so, in my mind, making sure that the front of the company where the real work's happening has the support to do that has been, I think, transformative for some of the companies who get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. That's so it is funny. I guess I've never thought about the idea of not even thinking or considering or
Right.
discussing culture. And this is bringing up a conversation. My dad has been at the same company for his entire career. And I've always wondered what it's like for him, like in thinking about culture, because he's never been outside of that company. And I remember talking to him one time, like very early on in my career, and I started in advertising, which I say when it comes to culture is the epitome of the like ping pong table, beer
Oh,
cooler
yeah.
culture. Fluff. And I remember telling him, I was like, I don't think it's that hard to have good culture. Like, you just have to show up and appreciate people. And I remember him being like, that's why I've always stuck around. Like, I've always just felt, noticed and appreciated. And it doesn't always have to be these big, extravagant, and oftentimes kind of things like t shirts and, hot dogs in the break room or whatever.
Well,
So
I think, Sarah, I think that's important to note, because that for me is not culture, right? Those
no, not
are,
at all. Yeah.
and I think a lot of companies try to focus on those types of
Mm-hmm.
things and present them as culture. But you cannot have a good culture in an organization unless you have strong, good leadership who are aligned, who are
Definitely.
great at making sure that their organizations have real clear focus on what the goals are. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not resonate, if you don't have people who are all focused on the same right things, you start to have absolute chaos. And truthfully, that's where a lot of politicking comes into play too. And that's an absolute killer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, as I think one of the skills that you have that I just wish I could like pick out of your brain and put into my own is like your executive presence. The way that you can communicate during like a high stress or very important meeting is something that I remember so vividly in a couple of meetings that we were physically in together. And I was like just trying to be a sponge and absorb it all up. Was there any like I know some people have like executive coaches or go to public speaking courses. Like, was there anything that you did specifically that helped you to have the best communication style or have that executive presence when you're in a corporate setting?
Um, no formal training, but I took every opportunity to put myself around and be around people that I wanted to emulate. And
Mm.
I had some really great people around me who would put me in rooms and who would help me. But I would be purposeful about it. I would sit down with some of my mentors or some of my coworkers that I knew were like-minded, and we would talk about where we wanted to be, what we wanted to do, and we would help each other. And if I
Mhm.
didn't, like I said, have a mentor readily available, or maybe an executive who I could tap in for that, found different creative ways. So making sure that I was surrounding myself. And then sometimes, truthfully, you learn from what you see too on the opposite side of it. And I've had, unfortunately, some opportunity throughout my career to see what I did not want to emulate as well.
Mhm.
So it kind of goes back to making sure that you're surrounding yourself again with those the right people and people who will help you, and maybe you have the opportunity to reciprocate that too.
Mhm. I can't believe we haven't talked about this like throughout the entire time that we've been talking, but mentorship, you just talked about it a little bit. And as you are my mentor and someone that I call whenever I'm like going through the job hunting process, I can't even, I'm not even going to look at the amount of times I've called you and been like, please, please help me. Talk to us about the importance of mentorship, not only you mentoring others, but then also you being a mentee.
I think it's one of the more important things that you can do in your career, especially as you start to get that experience that will help somebody else. And, in my mind, we all rise if somebody's rising. You pull people up, you make sure that you're helping get the opportunity. I would not be where I am unless I had those people. And it was so critical to my successes, just having people be interested, care, and be willing to share what they've been able to learn, or even some of the roadblocks that they've been able to get over, or hurdles that they've been able to jump. So I didn't have to, or it was going to be easier for me. And I think that I would be remiss. I just wouldn't feel great about myself or the things that I've been afforded in my career, especially like some of the things that I just talked about that people have helped me with, if I didn't turn that back around. And I think that for me, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. It's fun for me when I, Ellen, let's look some of the calls that we've had through your job search and, just through our relationship. It's so gratifying to see you explode in your career and do all the great things that you're doing. Even if I could be some small part of that or help with that, that's a win for me, and it's so much fun to watch.
It's like little Ellen growing up.
Oh
Right
my
before
god!
your eyes.
Well, I don't know, little Ella growing up, but I mean, it's easier if you've got someone to ask the questions to, so you can get down the road a little bit further and maybe have better, quicker, faster success. And if I can impart anything to include things that again, I've pivoted on and that maybe I didn't feel like I went from A to B as quick as I could, or there was some ahas in there that I didn't know. If I can impart that and maybe share those experiences, I'm glad to do it.
Okay, last question before the success big question. Do you have any crazy work stories? Crazy good, crazy weird, crazy bad?
There's a lot of crazy work stories. There's one that has never left the kind of front of my head, and that goes back a while. But I was working at a smaller boutique company, and the owner of the company was intimately involved in the business, and he used to page people overhead, and would be like, "Toby, show up to Rob's office," or whoever it was, and
Scary.
it was, yeah, you just never knew what you were going to do, and you'd just be summoned, and then you would show up. On this day I was summoned, I went down there, and we were working on this really large project. And I'm sure for him, it was make or break. You never know what's going on, right? So something was not going well, and it was something that was outside of my department at the time, was not quite clear on the situation, but we were not going to make a deadline that he had articulated to the client. And so I think I was there maybe a year newer, and he wanted me to call the client whom I'd never talked to before and tell her that a tornado had hit downtown Kansas City.
Oh my God.
And I remember just standing there thinking, what? Right? That was my first thought. One, tornadoes don't typically hit downtown locations. Two, if it does, it's pretty newsworthy.
Mhm.
And three, what? They just so I talked to him a little bit about it. I told him I didn't think that was a really good idea. And he goes, okay, I understand. You're right. They could find that out on the news. He then wanted me to tell her that his son was in a wreck and that he had to go to the hospital. And I was like, I'm not going to tell her.
Like, what
I can laugh at
delusional.
now.
Like son's
Right.
liveliness. Oh my God.
It was just cuckoo. It was absolute insanity, but it was coming from a place of desperation on his part. Again, I had no idea what he told her. I just knew he needed out of whatever he was in. So
That's hysterical.
I mean, I can laugh about it so hard now, but at the time, I mean, I was looking at the owner of a business saying, no, sir, I am not going to do that, right? It could have been career limiting. It could have been all those things, but there's a couple of things in that I took away. One, being more resolute of getting those boundaries of who I am, who I'm not, what I'm going to do, and what I'm definitely not going to do. And I think you start to build those in your career as well. And you start to get really, really resolute and good at that. It's kind of like what I was talking about with the business end and defining what it is we're going to be good at, our service lines. I think knowing who you are and who you aren't and setting those boundaries help you to be more authentically true in that as well. It was one of those times talking about knowing when to leave. I knew that I was not going to be long for the world there if that was the mentality of the owner. And that's how he treated clients, and that's how he was going to show up if we didn't maybe hit the mark where we needed to be. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I did call her, talk to her, and instead of delivering the project all at one time, we were able to roll components of it out to her, which she was completely happy with. She just needed certain things by a certain date. And it turned out to be a super big win. But it was, I mean, I laugh about it now all the time. It was absolutely insane story. But going through it, it felt pretty rough and chaotic.
No kidding. Ellen and I talk a lot about like people having thoughts and then somehow still letting it come out of their mouth.
Come out, yeah.
Like this
tornado
man. Yeah.
Downtown.
No way. No way.
No way.
Oh my God, that is wild. And I'm glad that that is the one that has stuck in your head. Okay, big question. Toby, how do you define success?
I think that is, I mean, it's such an expansive question. And I think if you ask me that at different time periods, it would be a different answer. But ultimately, I think success for me is being in a place where it's the right fit, it's the right priorities, it's just the right place to be. And that for me turns itself into I get to work on exciting creative things that pushes my limits and my boundaries. I get to work with great people. I get to work with people who not necessarily like-minded, because I think it takes a lot of different diverse ideas to make a good department, a good team, a good company work very well and efficiently and effectively. But that you have an opportunity to work on something that serves a purpose. And in my mind, that then, if you're putting yourself in a position to do all of that, then the other stuff starts to fall in place very easily. You know, again, opportunities for learning. It's hitting your financial goals. It's allowing for work-life balance, which is a whole other subject and conversation, because you can't have it all at one time, but you can have it all. And in different ways. And if you are sitting in a place where it's the right place for you, that starts to become easier to make decisions around work-life balance. And then it puts you again in a position, we just talked about the mentoring opportunities, to be good stewards of people's career around you and show up for your the people working with you, for you, around you. And those types of things for me is success defined. It's all of it working together in a way that pushes you forward. It gives you creativity opportunities, and you're feeling great about it, right?
I love that quote. You can have it all, but you can't have it all right now. That
Yeah.
is something that
Yeah.
has really stuck with me because you see the pressure, you compare yourself to people around you, combined with imposter syndrome of why can't I have this all together? And that quote kind of brings me back to it's okay if you can excel in one area and then work on something else, later on down the road. So I love that quote.
But for me, success is having some choice in that, right? And whether it's in your career, and it's a new job, it's a big project, or it's something that's going to take your attention in your career for a minute, you might make the decision that some other things around you need to go in the back burner. Not that you're not going to do them or have no prioritization on them. It's just you make the decision of what's going to be pull priority 1 versus 2 versus 3.
Mhm.
And for me, when you have choice in that, that also is part of the success that I think that you can create in your career and in your personal life, because there's an intersection to all of that at some point in some time, because you cannot do it all at the same time.
Mhm. You'd go insane if you did that.
Yeah, you really would. Or
Mhm.
you burn out. I mean, you
Yeah.
talk a lot about burnout. You burn out, you get frustrated. And for me, when I found myself in a scenario of burnout, you're running too fast, too far for too long, or you're just not working back in that position where you feel you've got some control over some things.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Let's get into some rapid fire questions.
Oh
Toby,
gosh, all right.
First one. What is one thing you cannot live without during the workday?
I have two cups of coffee in the morning. Hardcore. It's 2 cups. 3's too many. 1's not enough.
Same. I'm a 2-cupper as well. I love that.
It's always coffee. It is
Mhm.
always coffee. Toby, what is your favorite way to unwind after work?
Oh, let's see. I like to get outdoors. Either walk with the dog, go hike some trails, just maybe get out in the backyard, especially with spring coming up. I love to garden. And if it's winter, maybe it's some yoga or something like that. But just out getting physical after work.
Definitely.
Ooh, some good movement. Love it.
Good movement, yeah.
What is one of the best benefits that you've had throughout your career?
I'm going to say education, because it has served me so well. And every place that I have ever worked or have been at, I've always taken them up on whatever educational opportunities that they have.
That is a good one. What is a corporate pet peeve that you have?
Politics, and
Mhm.
every company has them. But when it starts to become my biggest corporate pet peeve is when there's a lack of leadership at the top who allows the politics to get out of control to where it's impacting the business, the employees. Nothing can get done. Clients aren't happy. Revenue's suffering. And it just becomes, in my mind, no fun and counterproductive. It becomes that stuff kind of just falls away. I mean, I get it. There's going to be a little bit of that everywhere, and that's normal, healthy, and fine. It's just when it becomes the thing at the company.
Yeah.
And I think it's just sad.
Agreed. Last one. What is your favorite corporate catchphrase?
I use this one. Ellen, you can call me out on this one. It is, what's your bandwidth?
Oh my God, it
I'm
totally
sorry
is.
if that triggered you, but I don't know. I'm caught on that one. I know I say it. I hate it. I hate when I hear it.
But I appreciate it.
also,
Like being
Yes.
asked, like, how are you okay? How's your
Yeah.
workload in a nice, kind way? I genuinely appreciate.
but I can also say, hey, Ellen, how's your workload today? I don't have to say what your name is.
Okay, fine. That's true.
Check me on that one.
That's true.
I think
Yeah.
the other one that just I've never personally ever have said it. It's cringeworthy to me. Is the double click. Let's double click on that. I
Toby,
just
Ew.
I
can't.
should have guessed that you were going to say that because that was exactly as soon as you started that sentence, that was the word that came into my head. Because I also can't stand that one.
Can't stand.
Oh,
I have never used it. I never will. That is the cringiest one I've ever heard.
It's pretty cringy. I agree. Toby, thank you so much for
Yes,
your
thank
time
you.
and your expertise. It's so great talking with you. And then again, we said this earlier, but this is like a really fun full circle moment for me. And I feel like Sarah knows you so well at this point because I talk about you all the
Practically.
time. And
Mhm.
you probably know Sarah so well because I talk about her all the time. So it's so great for me selfishly to have my peeps all in the same digital room together. So
This has been a
and
blast. Thank you for having me. And again, congratulations to the both of you on the success of this. It's
Thank
just a
you,
blast to
Toby.
watch.
Thank
Thank you.
you. We will make sure to include all of the places that you can find Toby in the show notes. Make sure you're following us on, I want to say Pinterest every time, and I don't know why. Make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn has been popping off. Thank you to anyone who's been following us on LinkedIn. I hope you guys have a fabulous rest of your Monday. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's literally just a job. Thanks. Bye.